Yeah, it's the last meeting for a couple of us, so
I'll be right with you.
you're gonna get unfiltered.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah,
We're just be prepared.
yeah.
Okay.
Unfiltered Virginia is a whole experience.
A good one.
You don't judge it either way.
And we are live.
Thank you. We'll call to order this meeting of the City of Salem Bond Oversight Committee for December 19th, 2024. President Arpoy. Fort Wright.
Barney.
Stapleton.
All right, and I would like to go around the room and do staff introductions because we have so many people here. We need to get it in the minutes, and there are several faces that I'm not familiar with. So why don't we start down here with Scott?
Scott Archer, Deputy City Manager.
Josh Nicholson, Chief Financial Officer.
Chris Hoy, the mayor.
Bob Courtright,
Aaron Kimsey, City Salem.
Keith Staley, City Manager. Mike Aaron, Victim.
Nikki Barney, City Councilor.
Virginia Stapleton, City Councilor.
Brian Martin, Public Works Director.
Kelly Lakeshman, Management Analyst.
Rob Rumnack, Park Planning Manager.
Nate Koenig, Julie's assistant.
Julie Hansen, Transportation Planning Manager.
Aiden Denver, who's other assistant.
Wow.
Wait, hold on a second.
Wow.
Really?
Wow. This is a public meeting being recorded, being broadcast out live on YouTube. Let's not create false narratives that Julie has an empire.
Yeah.
I'm Rick Barnes, Assistant City Engineer.
Engineer Shioka, City Manager. City.
Yeah, oh, there's some foreshadowing. There's some foreshadowing. I told you this meeting was gonna be off the hook, but I didn't know it was gonna be that off the hook. Wow. Wow. Over to you.
Bruce Ferguson, City Planning Facility.
Mark Quinn, Board 2.
Hallie Leinenbach, Budget Manager. Cat 3D, Finance Project Manager.
Frank Stevenson, Fire.
Brian Carson, Archer.
All right, thanks everybody. Do we have anybody online? No. Okay. All right, and we have Courtney Knox Bush joining us, our Strategic Initiatives Manager. Is anybody behind you, Courtney? Okay. We might have to ask the fire guys to leave because I think we might be over our rated limit for the room. All right. Is there any public comment?
So I just wanted to make a brief request. I understand there's a lot of very important infrastructure needs for the bond, but I know there was some discussion about cutting the budget for Peace Plaza. And as I understand it, Courtney, it, she explained it when we were talking about the bond, it's kind of like a concept. And I think the public, the Peace Plaza is a vision. So in the bond, it says there's culture and greenery, and so it's going to encourage, the committee to, fulfill those promises. 'Cause right now, Peace Plaza is, so it isn't functioning as it does. It needs to be welcoming, and a beautiful space. And
Thank you, Lynn. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move right into the action items. Funding request, Fire Station Bay Exhaust Project. Luke.
That's great. All right, this is the result of me asking finance for some funding, and all of a sudden here I stand. So, what we've got is a recent exposure of like the wrong use of word for air quality. Recent knowledge of some diesel particulates that might be getting into the bays of fire stations. This involves fire stations 2, 3, 4, 6, and 9. Currently, they're not up to code. They don't have exhaust fan or intake systems. So when a truck pulls in the bay, closes the doors, there sits all that diesel and all that nasty stuff that comes along with it. We had OSHA out, or actually RISC had OSHA come out and a strong arm them into doing tests at 3 stations. They only wanted to do 1. So thanks to our risk department, they were able to get OSHA to test. Overall, the BSAs and PAHs, I'm quickly learning HVAC expert, not a air quality expert. All came in underneath at the stations. 3 of the stations were borderline for formaldehydes, which inside the quarters, which turns out is one of the particulates that's bad in our carcinogen. So we obtained estimates from our Corps to upgrade those 6 stations for $130,000 to add, and that's for all of them, to add intake, exhaust, that the thermostat, the doors opening and closing, that could come on for a set amount of time. And that would also have an O2 sensor to where if the O2 got so high in the bay, and also we have our controls so we could track it. Or if the CO2's got high, we could run a report and know for the last 6 months what the levels were in that day. So
Is the formaldehyde related to the diesel?
yes, it is. It also can be related to air sprays, body deodorants, all kinds of things that I just heard. It's funny. But yeah, it's overall can be a lot of things. The personal use products, what those just stated, don't have to list formaldehyde. So you could have an aerosol spray that's full of formaldehydes and it's not required to list it on the ingredients. So the recommendations by OSHA are to keep the doors open as much as possible, which for security reasons and as fire knows isn't a great idea to have bay doors wide open and people wandering in. They also recommend to keep the doors from the bays to the living quarters closed. Not really possible when you have to come and go for calls all the time. So that's why I'm recommending the centralized automated system.
Okay.
Just to speak a little to the funding source. So currently all the apparatus we included in the bond was $26 million for the purchase of all the apparatus and equipment. Where fire is currently estimated approximately $600,000 of savings in that area. So we're looking at other fire related capital needs on the general fund side, potentially utilize some of that funding. This was an urgent need that was requested earlier this year. We're also looking at potential large capital maintenance projects at the fire stations to utilize some of those funding pieces. But this is the first one that we're looking for approval for.
What about the possibility, or have we already budgeted for proceeds from the sale of the old equipment?
We don't know exactly what we're going to receive for that.
Right.
You are correct. We do expect some proceeds. Generally, that would go into the equipment replacement reserve. It could be utilized for other needs potentially. But right now, we're looking at that $600,000 amount. Happy to address any questions.
It just seems like the bond funds are so restricted on what we can use them for. It would seem like it'd be better if we had some more flexible money to spend on this project. It might make more sense. And it seems like the proceeds from that sale are more flexible. There's really no restriction on those. And I'm sure that we'll get at least $130,000 with,
We certainly hope so. I will say that the reason there's no restrictions on the sale is because the previous bond that purchased the apparatus is completely paid off. If that bond was outstanding, those same restrictions would apply. You'd have to put it back into bond funding. So just for clarity, the reason why it can be unrestricted is because those bonds are paid off.
Thank you.
Well, okay. This kind of ties into a couple of things. Could the bond fund, I mean, as you said, I like the idea of if we are under budget for the fire stuff at this point, can't we use that money elsewhere, like East Plaza or somewhere? Just because we under it, because so many of our other projects in other areas are over, just because of the increased costs. And one of my concerns is this scope creep that I see with what voters approved when they voted for this bond. And I realized that, the replacement of the fire engines was there. When the bond paid for the 2 additional ambulances, was that going to be reimbursed?
Those were always included in the bond.
They weren't listed on the website. So I was wondering, it just said fire stations and then associated equipment. So I wanted to make sure people understood that, or that the bond fund was going to be reimbursed, one of the 2. So that wasn't clear to me, for instance, when we had the well, I don't need to dwell on the ambulance part right now. It wasn't clear to me from the presentation we got back in September on the Finance Committee, I guess, that was not going to be reimbursed. So I do have some concerns, not because of just this amount, but we are strapped in other areas, and this does not, you know, these other expenses, yes, it's needed, but I'm not sure this is where it should come from without being reimbursed by the EMS fund. If
For
that
the,
makes
for the
sense.
2 ambulance.
For the ambulances and even anything that wasn't specific that could be looked upon as maybe not being directly included. Sure.
It's certainly this body's prerogative to have that philosophy. We've had discussions on the staff side about how to treat if there are bond savings or bond overages in certain categories, how to treat those, if you keep it in the same category or if you make it available for any other category. It's not something we've gotten to quite yet. We're still just into actually getting to project execution for a lot of areas. This is just the first one where it's this bucket is going to be finished, right? The apparatus is going to be delivered next year. We're expecting this saving, so we're not going to be done with any other category for years.
Question I have is, we're sort of, the discussion is sort of assuming that this expenditure would fall within the parameters of what we're allowed to spend on the bond. Is that the case?
It is the case, yeah. So there's some pretty broad language about
Yeah.
maintenance of city facilities, capital maintenance of city facilities.
Figure out.
I think I share a concern that Councilor Marnie was expressing is, you know, these are the initial expenditures that we're making under the bond fund. And those are the ones that we have the most knowledge about, and most comfort. There's a lot more uncertainty as we go forward, given inflation and the way costs of other projects are running out. So I'm concerned with kind of where we are in the overall commitments that we've made in the bond measure. So just express that concern.
So these expenditures sound really necessary.
Yes. To me too.
This isn't discretionary. So we're going to have to find a funding source. And I think the funding source is general fund reserves. So that's the question in front of us. Do we use general fund operating reserves, or do we use bond proceeds for this? And general fund is really restricted.
Understatement of the.
Yeah. The king of understatement.
Has the Fire Foundation been asked to come in and support it all, or no?
Well, I agree that this isn't optional. We have to do this work. That's clear. But my question is how are we going to pay for it? I'm not comfortable with it coming out of bond proceeds.
And it's going to come out of general fund.
That's just my take. I don't know.
Or the other.
I'm stuck because it's needed work, and I get the frustration because, you know, there's a lot of really needed things that need to be done with money, and there's fun things that need to be done with money, right? Investing in our parks is fun and necessary. Our library is likewise. Making sure that our transportation system is fully funded. There's a ton of projects in there, and are we gonna have enough money to do that throughout the next 8 years or so? I'm not entirely sure. So it's really difficult, but at the same time, these are people's lives and their health, and they are workers of the city, and they are first responders. And I think sometimes the frustration always comes in because that group of people, their needs always rise to the top over everybody else's. And I think sometimes that gets hard when you have asked for the city to vote for a bond that is supposed to be for everybody, and then the needs are always shifting to that one side of things. So sometimes that's hard, but as a leader, I think it's necessary to make sure that their lives are protected in every way that we can protect them. So I wish that well, above all, I wish the city wasn't in the position that it's in. I wish that our efforts would have been successful in making sure that the city has what it needs in order to be successful. And this is just another hard point that it comes down to. And
So where are we at? Do I use bond funds, use other funds? That's the question.
Reimbursed
From?
from EMS eventually, just like the other loan that.
For the bays.
I mean, just, we overall had the loan for the 6 million or whatever it was. Following that same sort of process, can't we do that? Once the EMS fund is generating more funds.
For this specific purchase for the 100.
Well, eventually, but down the road, I mean, our bond is gonna keep going. We have what, 2 more, what do you call them?
I think he's trying to draw the distinction. When your comments, you talked about having an issue with ambulances and your ongoing issues with EMS. And then there's this question about this 130,000. He's trying to figure out, are you talking about the 130,000 or are you talking about ambulances?
Well, actually, both. But,
Well, we're not gonna talk about
but right
ambulances
now,
today.
yeah, I was leaving out the ambulances because that to me was a issue as well. And this is kind of similar in that sense. We do need it, and it's 130,000. It's a safety issue. I'm not sure this is the appropriate fund to pull it out of, but I also know we don't have much in like a health and safety fund probably to cover it. So I'm on the fence. I'm supportive of it, but I'm just registering that I'm not real happy with it in terms of where it's coming from.
Kind of excited with me on that.
I don't know how to interpret either of your
Well-
comments. To know if we're reaching a consensus. or not.
The categories that we said we would spend on those bond funds on fire needs, and you could make an argument or, sort of twist it that it fits within that. But, I mean, we're getting our first public comment today that we've had in almost 2 years of doing this, and the comment is about expenditures on specific things that we said we would do with the bond fund, and so that is sort of weighing on me, thinking, okay, well, let's just keep it right within the 4 corners of what's on the paper there.
It's okay. I lean that direction. I'm still curious about the funds that we're gonna get from selling the existing equipment. Is that part of what we're accounting for when we talk about what's eligible for the bond?
No, those wouldn't be bond projects. Those would go into the general fund, I think.
Our intent would be to put them in the equipment replacement reserve so they're eligible for additional equipment as it comes needed for replacement. That is a policy choice. The city council could choose to put it somewhere else.
I'm not sure where we landed.
I don't think all 4 of us have said anything to articulate our thought. So it's on us 4. You have said what you would like.
Yeah.
I am really struggling with taking anything more out of the general fund. And so I don't think that there is a great place to land on this. But I guess I will land on the bond money.
Okay. And it sounds like you guys were okay with the end of the day on the bond.
I'm okay with the bond, yes, because safety is the priority here.
Okay.
I was actually saying the opposite. Within the
Oh, okay. So that's why I didn't want to try to interpret, because like,
So within the 4 corners of the paper, right, what the paper says, the categories, does it fit nice and neatly into one of those categories? I don't know that it does. So for that reason, I would say, no, not out the bottom.
okay. Bob, you're the decider.
I think I'm with my,
So it's no.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 to 3. So let's spend it out of general fund.
We'll bring back a budget amendment.
But to be clear, we all are very supportive of getting this work done ASAP. That's not the question. The question is how we're gonna pay.
Understood.
So, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Okay, Livingston Park Playground Replacement, Rob Romanek.
Get up here. Good afternoon. The bond included $6 million to replace 10 playgrounds in existing parks throughout the city.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, that is fun. Taking a huge swing here. We are talking about the playground at Livingston Park, which is the first of the 10 playgrounds. And we are seeing some cost escalations in the project, and that's why I'm here speaking in front of you.
We have $600,000 that we can offer you.
Yeah. Can you just move on? Okay, here. So a little information about Livingston Park. It is located to the east of the fairground near the interstate. You really can't talk about this park without talking about Lansing Park, which is really close by. The purple area up there is the park's half-mile. It's like an estimate of the half-mile walking service area of the neighborhood park. So it's intended to serve local residents in that area. Located in Ward 4 in the NOLA Neighborhood Association.
Ward 5.
I'm sorry, Ward 5. I'm just right in front of me. I just misread it there. Just a little bit note about the neighborhood it serves. You know, it is, if you took data, demographic data, and you drew a map of disadvantaged communities in the city, this would certainly be included in that area. That's the point I want to make. What I have highlighted, it's been tagged in some federal mapping as an area with low income and as low educational attainment. That census tract includes everything from Silverton down to Sunnyside, and then moving west to the railroad tracks, and with the I-5 being on the east side. So it really is pretty relative to the service area there. So next slide. Livingston Park today, focusing on the playground, it has a one place structure there in the first photo. If you move to the right, that's actually, if you were there in the park, you would be just turning a little over to the right. There's a field there. I want you to keep that image in your head. I'm gonna come back to it in the next slide. Wait, well, real quick, those bottom photos. Maintenance access and the access to the neighborhood is this lower photo here. Our service vehicles drive through that. It's very narrow. So it creates a mud slick. It's not a good look. I'm just gonna be really straightforward with that. And so that's something we would hope to address through this project, but it is scope creep, to be honest. And then another shot of the existing play equipment, which is tired and ready for replacement. So next slide, please. This is just a quick aerial view to kind of show everything I was talking about with the open field there, the existing playground with just the one structure, access to the neighborhood. And I just want to point some of the existing land uses to the north. We have Salem Housing Authority, which has its own playground. And then we have self-storage to the south. Next slide is is Lansing Park, because you got to talk about Lansing Park. Lansing Park is a very, very small park. This is my argument, with a flood detention basin attached to it. So it is not much of a park. It has a slide, a really old swing, and a climbing structure. Next slide. We're going to look back in time at Livingston Park here for a second. Two things just to highlight. The one that's most important for this discussion is there used to be a bigger playground there. If you could kind of make out there to the northwest corner of the park, there is a secondary playground area that has been lost to time.
Over here, and that kind of what looks like sand area on the far
that's
left.
right. That was an additional, yeah. And then there was a much more robust riparian canopy cover, which I thought was interesting as well.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
What
But
happened?
otherwise, it's pretty much the same as it was back then. Yeah. So recurring grass has taken over, and we've obviously lost a lot of trees. So that's what's happened. Moving on to just our proposal, our schematic design proposal. We are proposing to kind of deliver a full playground for the neighborhood park, and that does include resurrecting that former playground area. It's really hard to see on this figure, but we did have survey go out, and they actually found the curbing for that former playground area. It's still there, it's just buried slightly underground. And so simply we want to put back what's there, have space for swings. Swings take up a lot of space. Also, we can have tot structure or young children play equipment and some freestanding equipment as well. So this is what we're proposing. It includes some seating for caretakers to have a comfortable place to sit and watch their kids. And then I mentioned, although it's not shown in here, is we're proposing to repave that access to the neighborhood as well. So next slide. This is the playground equipment. We did a survey of the neighborhood residents and got some feedback on what they'd like to see, and then that has landed us to this preliminary playground concept. We're still moving the play equipment around, but more or less this is what we're proposing to buy. It's from a vendor called Pack and Play, and they're based here in Salem, and the product they're repping is Little Tikes Commercial. We don't have any Little Tikes Commercial in our system right now, but however, some of the surrounding communities around us do. And we've gone out, we've looked at them, they're 10 years old, they look like they're quality materials, so we're feeling comfortable with that choice. Keep going on. I'm going to roll through our last 3 playground projects just to give some parity to what we've delivered elsewhere in the city at other neighborhood parks. I think that's really important for this discussion. This is our playground equipment replacement we completed in Reese Park, which is far south Salem. We completed this earlier this year. I want to highlight it included a large school-age structure, a small tot-age structure, a new swing system, and a few freestanding elements. So, and then if you keep going, you're gonna see that theme repeating. So here's Bill Regal Park. We delivered this park a few years ago as a second phase. Again, my takeaway here is we have the school age structure, we have the tot age structure, we have swings, lots of swings, and we have a few freestanding pieces of equipment. And then going back maybe 4 years now, we have Seaport Park. Again, we have 2 structures that are connected with a bridge. Again, the school age, the tot, we have generous swings, and we have some freestanding equipment. And one more thing I want to highlight as we have this discussion is the Salem process. When it was completed, the city council adopted some new goals as part of the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan. So there's new goals for Parks and Recreation, and there's one I want to highlight here. That's the goal to consider need-based equity when allocating funding for the renovation of recreational facilities. So I think that's important to highlight as part of this discussion. So I think my last slide, getting to it, current total projected cost of this project is $7,332. Our goal is to be under $600,000, so that's 1/10 of the $6 million. But we are obviously over that amount. We are that existing south playground area is the bulk of the cost, but then resurrecting that former playground area is over $300,000. And I'm going to note that the engineering has a 30% contingency on this cost estimate. So there's quite a bit of extra in there in case something unknown arises in the project. So the guidance we're looking for today, should we proceed with a larger bond allocation to this project? So that means there's going to be theoretically less money available for the other 9 playgrounds. Do we reduce the scope, or we do a combination of both? Some ideas about how we could scale down the project. We could reduce the amount of freestanding play equipment and potentially just shrink some of those 2 playground areas down a little. We could eliminate that north play area, the one we're trying to resurrect, or we could, or I shouldn't say or we could take out landscaping as part of this project. So we are trying to put a little bit of landscaping with these playgrounds to kind of make it an attractive environment for the residents, and that could be removed from the project, probably save around $20,000.
Thank you, Rob. I would just like to speak to these 2 parks in general, having spent quite a bit of time in the 2 parks. And having represented that neighborhood association, I didn't represent this particular area, but I represented the neighborhood association, so I heard a lot of conversation. I know how significant these 2 parks are to this area of town. I don't live too far from there, a couple, 3 miles or so, but these 2 parks are critical to this neighborhood, unlike most of our parks in town. When I-5 was established and just essentially cut them off from a good part of their community, you've got I-5, you've got Hawthorne, and then you've got this park, and it's not walkable, it's not safe. Kids have been killed on bikes on that street. They don't have many places to go. These 2 parks are, I can't overstate how important they are to the neighborhood and to the children in this neighborhood, and how they don't have the opportunities that most kids in our city have. And so in my mind, this is where we need to be. I don't normally advocate for going over, but to me, this park is where we should do it if we're going to do it. I just wanted to say that out loud.
Question for Rob, and I think it ties into what you're saying. We can only work on our scoring criteria, and with the scoring thing. Where did these parks land in that? I can't recall in that scoring criteria. And is that why they're in front of us now, or is there some other efficiency or something else that's bringing these parks up now?
So if I understand correctly, I think you're asking about the trail replacement prioritization we were working on several meetings ago. And so that's specifically to the bucket of funding for park path replacement. So this is part of 10 specific parks that were identified as part of the bond initiative. And this was ranked the highest of the 10. So I think that would mean this is the highest priority of the 10. And so that's why we're starting with it.
Ranks the highest in what process, I think is what he's trying to
So,
say.
so this was when we were developing the scope for the bond, we were considering kind of asset criticality. How close is it to failure? And that is the factor that drove that prioritization, why this specific 10 playgrounds are in the bond.
That to me sort of pushes me to where the mayor's at, which is I would allocate more towards that most acute need at the outset.
Was there an equity consideration in that evaluation, Rob?
I do not believe so. However, I do want to say that all the projects are scored in the CIP, and that CIP score does include an equity component.
That's what you're thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, we implemented that equity process after that initial list was created. So now that when we do paths or different things, now equity is considered, but to get to this first list and when we get to the CIP list, equity is included, but it wasn't, just that first part.
And I suspect that these projects would score well.
If this project had an equity score, just the demographic information alone would pop it up.
Yeah,
to that.
that is sort of what I was asking, but it is good to be reminded of both of those scoring processes.
Yeah.
And the fact that this is at such a high.
I'll just add that, this project, this park and Morningside is the other one that was high on the list for criticality of equipment. Those are both going to construction this summer. We have a similar estimate for Morningside and it's tracking, at 550. So we're already hoping to see a $50,000 savings on that park.
Great.
So that doesn't bridge the gap, but you could argue that.
But that 30% contingency is pretty significant. I mean, that the 30% contingency
Yes, that will
alone is
come
the
down.
gap.
Yeah, so as we
So-
go out to bid, we're gonna reduce that contingency. We should try to carry 10.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we will see right after we go to bid, we'll see that savings.
That's gonna take it way down.
That'll take it down and then, we're gonna make these at a good time. Yeah.
Knock on wood.
Gonna make these at a good time, so hopefully we'll get some competitive pricing contractors.
Yeah.
So
Are you packaging any of these together or are they all one?
these are gonna be packaged together. These
This
are
and Morningside?
and Livingston,
Okay.
yeah. So we'll get some economy of scale, potentially, even other bigger parts of town.
Yeah. Okay.
If I could just share one thing
Yeah.
here. Contingencies are important, as we found out with the Middle Brown parking lots. We ran into contaminated soils and I just saw a change order for over $100,000 for it here in the last couple of days. And so you don't always know what you're going to find. And that's one reason we do have contingencies in these projects now.
Well, especially when we're digging up an old equipment or we don't know what was there.
It's hard to know what was there. So
Yeah.
now we do drop them, as Aaron pointed out, as we get closer to
Sure.
construction, but things come up and that's why they are. important.
For sure.
And I will say that, I've had some conversations with the contracting community and all of them are very nervous with the tariffs and the potential for tariffs.
Yeah.
So that is potentially could drive up costs as well. So another reason to hold on to it.
Other feedback? Yeah, Bob.
I'm supportive, understanding of especially the equity considerations here. I'm curious though, maybe I wasn't listening carefully about the relationship of the two playground areas programmatically. I mean, what needs do they serve? Are they overlapping in any way? Or?
Yeah, the point I was attempting to make is that they have a pretty much complete overlapping service areas. So these parks are serving the same part of the town, same residents. But I do want to highlight that Lansing Park is the actual usable section that we can develop amenities is very small. And it's in the corner of the service area, as this is more centrally located.
It's really a huge catch basin with a little land area on the side of it.
Right. I can picture it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, again, the estimate for the two playground areas that we're spending on is, are those physically proximate? And
So the North Play area, so there's, if you go up to a couple, if you can see, there's a wide path running through these two discrete areas.
Yeah.
The north estimate is simply the equipment and the improvement to the north, bringing back what was a playground once upon a time. And then the other estimate, the higher amount is that southern piece, which has the larger play structure on it in this concept.
But
So
those don't overlap.
it's all at Lansing Park.
And they don't overlap. I mean, in terms of it's considered one development, one
project. It's one
Contingent,
project. For discussion purposes today, we had to, we cut it in half.
I also wanted, I'm with Curtis and Bob, I agree with you all. And I also wanted to speak to the greenery. I think that's really important to keep that.
Yes.
especially in this area of town. I'm wondering if there's any partnership with our arborist in order to bring back some of that canopy that was there. And also, this is kind of a catch basin for, it's kind of a wetland. Am I right?
Yes,
These parts.
Kelly, you go back up to that page you were just at.
I'm just wondering if.
We did
there's
plant some
other-
trees there a few years
It-
ago.
If you see that subtle blue line, we
Yep.
had a wetland delineation completed for the
Okay.
project. That is the edge of the wetland.
Okay.
Yes, preparing these slides, I assist the urban forester in kind of the planning of tree planting, the
Mhm.
planning for tree planting, excuse me. I certainly caught my attention, so I do intend
Yeah.
to discuss this with Mylan.
Yeah, and is there any other access to funding to help support that rehabilitation of that wetland?
There's a city tree fund that we can use to plant and establish trees. We also have with stormwater utility funds, we have a program of Friends of Trees, a contract with Friends of Trees. So those are two avenues that we can explore. That this is for initial establishment of plants. It will be an ongoing operational administrative burden to keep that going, to make sure it's successful, to manage the Reed Canary grass, those kind of things.
And if Congress will ever get their act together and actually continue their operation and get us our $1 million that they owe us for trees, that would be amazing. With
Wouldn't that be
grant-
nice?
Yes.
Yeah, I would just really encourage that in the future. I think tree canopy in this area is something that's desperately needed.
For sure. Are we all good?
Yeah, I agree, and I second your comments on trees. I don't know, Stephen, if with this moving forward, why can't we go ahead and plant trees early? I mean, as soon as possible. It looks like there are a lot of areas we could be planting trees.
There have been some planted. I've participated in the tree planting there, but
I have
there's
too,
definitely
but
room
yeah.
for more.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree with you.
Okay, I'm
completely.
supportive.
Cool.
Thank you. Yes.
Great. Let's see, missing sidewalk policy direction, Julie.
Thank you.
Welcome to the table.
Yeah.
Do you need one of your assistants? I can move.
I think one of my assistants, Nate, is gonna hand out a handout that we have. We have 20 copies, so we may not have enough for absolutely the whole back row.
Wow, thank you.
So I will say that this presentation, Nate really helped a lot with this. Nate is an employee of DKS. So he is a temporary staff additive.
Yes, he augmented staff when Anthony
Augmented.
decided to leave the city and we needed to have
Yes,
some help for Julie.
yes. So he has been very helpful. And then Hayden has been here about a month and he keeps coming back. He's my new transportation planner. So I'm very excited to have him as well. So we are here to give a quick update on the sidewalk infill category of the safety and livability bond. And then also ask for some guidance to help us move to the next step. Okay, so just as a quick reminder, we have in transportation in the bicycle pedestrian area, we had these three categories, the pedestrian crossings, sidewalk replacement, and sidewalk infill. We have the squiggly about line there because you might remember that some of these categories, we've already made decisions to allocate some of the funds from, so approximately. So today we're talking about the sidewalk infill. A reminder of the process. So we started by getting public input on possible locations. Then you will remember we had developed an evaluation criteria working with this committee that council had then approved. We have gone through and scored all the requests. And we are have developed preliminary cost estimates for the top ranking projects. And we are in the process of developing a preliminary recommendation to bring to this committee. But today's questions are going to help us get there. Following that, we will then get to do public input on that preliminary recommendation and bring it back to this committee for a final recommendation to go to council before we move to design and construction. Okay, next. As a reminder, the scoring criteria that we used up here heavily relied on the equity and also the street classification. Those schools, parks, and transit were also components of that. In terms of the requests that we received 225 requests that are shown on this map. we've scored 206 of them. There were 19 that were just not relevant. The darker reds, oranges are the higher priority ones. The blues are the lower priority ones, given that equity scoring. So we then took the top 20 projects to look at a bit more closely and scope. We've developed those preliminary cost estimates for those top 20 projects, and the total exceeds $50 million. We have $6 million, so we need to work within that to come down to a recommendation. And that is why we're here today. Next. So here are the questions. So we have a number of slides talking about the different questions. I'd welcome, thoughts or questions as we go along, but at the end, I also have a slide to sort of recap and get direction on each one of these, because it probably will be helpful for you to have all of the questions in your head before you decide on one. So in this one here, we're talking about sidewalk on one side of the street versus on both sides of the street. And this is just one example. There are other examples. Here, somebody requested sidewalks on Brenner. That's that north-south street there. There are bits of sidewalk on each side, but there's not continuous on either side. What we scoped was the sidewalks that you should see there in red. They also requested sidewalks on Weathers Street. Weathers Street already has sidewalks on the south side of the street, does not have sidewalks on the north side of the street. You can see Weathers Park there at the south end. One of the interesting things here is that sidewalk on the south side of Weathers Street, we actually built with the same pot of money from the 2008 bond measure. So one of the questions is, when somebody asks for a sidewalk and we already have one on one side, are we doing both, or do we just stick with one's good enough?
I mean, this is my ward. I've walked this neighborhood many times. I've been in Weathers Park numerous times. I also, just in case people don't remember, we are just, as we speak, installing traffic calming devices on Weathers right there. Some street humps in there, and Terra, which is just the next Tierra, sorry, next street down. But I don't see that would be a priority to have them on both sides of the street. We have them on very, very nice sidewalk on the south side there. To me, I can definitely see Brenner, because there's nothing, and it's not great. But that's just a neighborhood, that's just a residential. Brenner is not a heavily used street. Weathers, different story. It's a, pretty heavily used. Brenner is just a local residential street. I don't,
Is Weathers a collector?
It's a local.
It's probably
It's
local.
local.
Yeah, it's not even that.
So, and then just as a quick reminder, this is an example. We do have other locations where we have similar issues.
Yeah.
So, your input on the specific project is great, but we're also going to want sort of that bigger perspective. And when you look at the table that I handed out, so this is that top 20 projects. They are sorted here in the priority order. And, you can look, we added in the street classification just so you can, get a sense there. The two driving factors in the priorities were the equity and the street classification. So local, of course, didn't get a lot of points for the street classification end, but if you were in an area with a high equity score, that pushed you up.
Yeah.
So.
Can I add one more thing, Julie?
Yeah.
So as we talk about these things, so that cost estimate now under project number 6 is 1.275. We decide, now we already have sidewalk on one side on Weathers. We go back and we take that out, and then we have an opportunity to look at something that's a little bit less.
And I was trying to speak in ways that would highlight the overall policy question. But to me, when you have it on one side of a street, it's not like this is a collector. If this was a collector, I'd be like, yeah, put them on both sides. But a local street, I don't see that. When you have so much more need, to me, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's just a good point about these preliminary cost estimates. Brian knows that I was very nervous about, giving these out to people, because they're going to change based on your policy direction.
Sure.
So it will be different. when
It's
we come
helpful
back.
for context
Yeah.
for us
Yes.
when we're having this conversation.
Yeah, that's what
When,
he thought.
when I look at like number 2, Park Avenue, I mean,
Mhm.
Park Avenue needs whatever we can give it.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like it's highly traveled, higher speeds than should be. You know, when we compare it to a project like this, Park Avenue is much more important for pedestrian safety than this street, in my mind.
Okay, so next slide. So this is sort of similar, but different. So where somebody requested a sidewalk, but to do the sidewalk, you pretty much have to do a full urban street standard upgrade, which ends up making the cost, a little higher.
Significantly.
Somewhat, so here are just 2 examples that require a full urban street upgrade. One of them is, I think, 24th Street over to the right, just a local street. Both of these are local streets, Fairhaven Avenue.
I can't picture Fairhaven. Where's that at?
It comes off of Silverton?
Say commercial.
No.
No, it's not.
No, it's I think it's rotated. We should have had a north arrow. It comes off of Silverton going north.
Thank you.
And it's in really, really crappy condition, the pavement. And it has some weird parking for apartments and stuff coming right off of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it
Straight
almost
on
looks like
parking.
it has.
Yes.
yeah,
it's,
weird.
So it would be yeah. So anyway, this is just another example of
Julie, if I can, is it terminate at Northgate Park? Would that be helpful?
yes, I think it
Oh, is that
terminates
what
at
Northgate
Northgate
is there on the
Park, yeah.
left?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That is helpful.
Okay, so as I said, we'll come back to these at the end, but just giving you that context. Okay, next one. Trees. There are some projects, this is probably the most prominent one, where, we went to scope it and it was just like, wow, there's gonna be a lot of tree impacts from this project. And how big of a deal, is that as we develop a recommendation and bring it forward? This is K Street, it's a local street, connects from 17th over to 19th near Englewood Park. Has, as you can see, curb on both sides, but no sidewalk on either side. The, north side has more driveways. They both have a lot of trees.
You gotta weigh the benefit of the sidewalk to the losing of the trees, and in my mind, on a street like K, it doesn't meet that criteria. Like that's, you can't cut down all those trees for a sidewalk on a street that, where there's an alternative, there's very little traffic.
Perfect world, I'd love to hear what the residents.
Of course, they're gonna say, no
Would you
way.
Rather have a sidewalk or,
Trees.
the trees.
Yeah.
Where they're at.
Right, and so that may be depending on where we land, where the committee lands. We're gonna have a preliminary recommendation coming out of this committee, and then it's going to be followed by, doing some public outreach, which would be specific. So if there's certain streets,
Well, we have the person who lives right near there, sitting here.
So children walk to school and it's a route to the park.
Yeah.
So to force children to walk in the street to get to Everwood Elementary School.
You okay to cut down those trees though? You get it?
I'm not happy with cutting
I didn't think so. I know that, that's why I'm like, you gotta weigh it. You can't have both. That's the dilemma.
I think the city can plant some additional trees.
The slide's a little deceiving. When you look at it on the right-hand side, it's like, there's no trees there, just put it on that side. And
Yeah.
Julie reassured me, you gotta look at the whole street. There's-
Yeah.
And I will say, we haven't gone to the level of detail to say, if you did it this side of the street, you're gonna have to cut down 4 trees. This side, you have to cut down 8 trees. We haven't gotten to that level yet.
My policy kind of position is you have to do a balance test.
Right.
And you have to decide what's the benefit for the sidewalk, what's the need, what's the benefit for the sidewalk, and then what's the cost, like how many trees is it gonna cost you? And you gotta weigh it out and figure out which outweighs the other. And then you're gonna have to take them project by project. I don't see any way to avoid it, but yeah, Mickey.
Are there any other alternatives to putting sidewalks on here?
Yeah.
I mean, slowing down traffic and put in
That's what I was
something they can walk along. I don't know,
Yeah.
something or other.
Yeah, like can we be creative,
Yeah.
make it one way and put a path in or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yellow brick road, something, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't remember the curb distance, but it's a local small street, yeah.
Yeah, that was my question. Like, what are the other ways that we could, I mean, could we put speed humps in or stop signs at every single intersection along the way? Or what are the ways that we can slow the speed down? Or can we, like you were saying, maybe take parking away on one side and create an actual sidewalk within the curb to curb existing?
right.
That could provide safety for people walking. It would be an inconvenience for people driving, like making it one way.
Yeah.
But I think that, again, that could be a trade-off that, you know, you're talking about trees or sidewalks, right? Well, could we actually bring that into the conversation as a trade-off as well?
Or what about like what we did on D with the meandering sidewalk? You know, is that an option where you meander, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, and we haven't gotten to that level of detail, so. Okay, it's helpful.
Okay.
Next. This one's a little bit complicated, but the leveraging of other potential funding. So this is using Fisher Road as an example. This is a place where we have, it's a collector street. We don't have sidewalks on either side of the street. We have Fisher Road Park that's developing up there. We have identified this as a potential grant application for SCATS funding, we submitted a pre-application for it. It has Marion County down near the south end. There's a potential development coming that would do another little bit. So I guess sort of thoughts on that, where there's a potential for other funds if we want to try to really aggressively pursue those, even though those are not, guaranteed, or what. And the same goes with development. So using Park as an example, the section of Park that's on this list here is actually that section that's right near Center Street, on the west side of the street, north of Center Street, connecting up where the new development is there. The state owns that property.
Across from the car repair business that parks on the sidewalk, so you can't walk on the east side of the street ever.
Yeah, and there really aren't
really
sidewalks
ain't.
there either. But the state's trying to sell that, and that will likely develop. And when it develops, it will be required to do sidewalks. So, it's you have these conflicting things of, like, do you wait for development or do you use the bond funds to get something now? So.
Well, I think we have to maximize our partnerships, especially when we have an opportunity to work with Marion County out in East Salem, especially where it goes in and out of the jurisdictions. And if there's a SCATS possibility, since it is dual jurisdiction, to me, it makes sense to try to do that. I mean, we don't have the luxury of not. So if that means potential delay, it means a potential delay, but if it means a project that actually can happen that wouldn't otherwise happen, we got to do it.
It's all about partnerships.
Okay, next.
Partnerships and delay it. I mean, we can put it further down on the
Right.
list.
There's other work to be done.
time-wise Until those other things
Yeah.
pan out.
Set
Right.
aside like some match funding or something.
Right.
And if you
Right.
get it, you get it. If not-
I'm just curious what the opportunity for partnership is with Marion County there.
Well, if we apply for SCATS funding,
Okay.
Marion County, we would look to them to help provide match because we wouldn't want to provide it outside of it. So, yeah.
Because that's
And Marion County has said that the staff level, they have said that they would be supportive of this grant application.
because that's the city county boundary, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
so the little blue at the bottom there is county, down there, yeah. It's just 3 lots, but it's,
But here we've had that conversation.
yeah. And that's near Cooley, which Cooley goes over to Chemeketa
Yep.
Community College.
Yep.
Okay, next. Okay, relative cost of projects, so, one of the general questions is, should we have a maximum cost of an individual project? Back with the 2008 bond measure, our pot was only about 2.4 million, and we decided then that 1 million would be the cap. We would not spend more than 1 million on any one project. Don't know if we want to have a cap on this or not, but just to show of the top 20, these are how they broke down. 2 of them were already over 6 million on their own, and since 6 million was the pot, we sort of said, yeah, that's, a cap. But then you can see the breakdown of the other ones. The other way to look at it is a cost per linear foot, because, what are you getting? We put in the cost per linear foot on this table. Once again, that is preliminary, and as we change in these numbers and the size of the street, it will change. But it has quite a range. And so I'm gonna go through like 3 different sort of scenarios to help illustrate this a bit more, and then we can talk about everything. So the next one. So here is if you were using these estimates as we have them, and if you were selecting just based on ranking, you would end up with maybe 4 projects. You'd already be at 6.5 million, but with some adjustments, that's what you'd get. Okay, next. If you instead said, let's look at, let's start at the with the lowest cost projects so that we can maximize the total number of projects, you end up with 9 projects and you haven't even gotten to the 6.5 million. Now, unfortunately, the next project would take you way over it. So that's why it's only at 5.2 there, but okay, next. And then this is basically looking at the cost per linear foot. So if you went with the lowest cost per linear foot, I have these shown in their rank order, but we listed the preliminary cost, whatever. Linear foot cost is up there as well. And this, once again, does go over the 6 million. And that's largely because project number 4 there has the highest cost per linear foot and is about a $2.5 million project. So it sort of pushed you way over. Okay, that's all the slides until this is the topic review. So, sidewalks, one side or both side. We got some preliminary feedback from you, Mayor Hoy. We have the full street improvement questions, tree impacts, leveraging of other funds, and then the relative cost of projects.
My just thought on the single relative cost of projects bullet is it seems arbitrary to have a cap. I'd rather have the other priorities be what decides and not the fact that it happens to be inexpensive. I want to know what the benefit is or what's the need. To me, that's the issue. The cost is the cost. I'd rather not. I'd rather have the other things be the decider. That's my take on it.
I don't disagree. I would share though that these are the top 20 projects out of the 200 and
I know.
ones we rank. So it's like,
I know. We're barely scratching the surface. But I'm like project 4. Thank you for calling it out. Is literally the first thing I worked on council.
Yeah.
Sandra Hill picking up her mail on Fisher Road. Got ran over.
That's that section there.
She got ran over and killed.
Wasn't she in the southern section where we're doing the bond project, standalone bond project? So we have a standalone bond project that's doing the sidewalks along Fisher.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that not this?
Yeah, no, this
section of
is
Fisher?
a little bit different. This is a north section. The south section goes from Silverton Road all the way down
They're in
to
the
the
south
curve.
section.
This is the section from Silverton up to Ward.
Okay.
And so it has
Sorry.
more city-county, overlap.
But it could still happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it will be then connecting to that bigger
Right,
project.
Right. Other thoughts on the bullets and the prioritization?
The first 4 seem like they're really tough to give a hard and fast rule without saying it's case by case. Like sidewalk on one side, for example, you could be in a position where maybe there's some services that are vital to the community. You've already got sidewalk on this side, but you really should have sidewalk on this side. And so to say, no, we won't do that that's a tough one. Maybe the starting position is always sidewalk on one side is okay to maximize the stretch, but we do need to look at them. Same with tree impacts, I think. No, it's probably not the answer you're looking for, is case by case basis, but
Can we talk about the full street improvements? Because I feel like that's out of the scope of this bucket of money.
I agree.
I kind of feel like that is, that would just suck up.
That's a different
everything.
project.
It's a completely different project.
It's not this scope. I think this is sidewalk infill.
Yeah.
And the fact that a full street improvement is required to do that sidewalk infill that eliminates it from this particular bucket.
Those are just my
It's a
feelings.
sad reality.
It is
but-
sad.
That helps though.
Yeah, to me, because that is the hugest cost escalator.
Right.
So get rid of those, drop them into some other bucket of potential money, they'll just go into the different, I mean, there's 196 other projects that are gonna be in that we can't do on the list anyway, so, we're trying to maximize this bucket for this purpose, like we told the voters we would do. So I think that's spot on.
Yeah, and my only other thing with this is I just would like the conversation to, and somebody could argue that this is out of the scope of this work too, but the idea of trying to figure out, is there other ways that we can do traffic calming or bring safety to pedestrians
Yeah.
on the street? So is it, putting in stop signs? Is it putting in speed humps? Is it,
Yes.
all of those things can help alleviate the sidewalk on one side, right? Like
Right.
that can also help. So I don't know, that I would love to bring that more fully into the conversation.
My street is an excellent example of that. We have a sidewalk on one side for most of my street. On the other side is a very overgrown space owned by the homeowners association, but yet is overgrown into the street, and there's a little bit of a curve. And so people walk on the non-sidewalk side because it's convenient, but yet, and cars whip around this blind curve. And if we were just to trim in the right of way and trim the bushes back, it would be astronomically safer. So there are things like that we could do to improve safety that don't require putting in the second sidewalk.
Yeah, and I also want to bring up that, 20 is plenty is coming, right? So dropping the speed limit on all of our residential streets is really important and is something that we've already taken initiative and found the funding for. So that's fantastic news for pedestrians.
Which is gonna hopefully reduce the criticality of some of these.
I think we can look at some of those things with these and talk to Dan and get an legal opinion on it. If we're trying to do a sidewalk, but we can't do both, but here's a measure to not have to put one on the other side. Maybe there's some wiggle there. I don't know, but we can look at those things.
I'm sure just having this conversation has put us in a bucket of risk. And we're gonna get.
Yes. Other thoughts? Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say I agree with that, especially the consideration of alternatives. I mean, we've come into this from the notion that we've got to put a sidewalk or that's the solution. And it's apparent that it's astronomically expensive. I mean, this is a drop in the bucket toward what 200 projects that we identified. I just think that really argues for us to do as cost-effective kind of improvements as we can. And that may not necessarily be a sidewalk.
Right, and to your point, everything we build is something we're gonna have to maintain in the future.
Yeah.
And we already can't maintain what we already have. So we have to take that into consideration as well.
I was going to ask a follow-up.
Yeah.
Is what's our time frame for carrying out all the projects that would be done with the sidewalk? Is it over the total bond program another 7 to 10 years? Is that right? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the program will be open that long. The sooner we move forward, the better the pricing will be. So, I mean, there's not a rush that we got to get this done
We
right
just
away.
finished up the 2008 bond a few months ago.
Yeah.
Not that
Yeah,
many
yeah,
months
yeah,
ago.
yeah.
So
I mean, the
it's,
pricing will be better, but if we could be more thoughtful about what the
Yes.
solutions are that get us
I
the
agree.
most effective. I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
take more time.
Take
to
more time
stretch the
and,
dollars.
just checking in to make sure we have consensus on eliminating full street improvements out of this bucket. Is that true? Mickey, are you on board with that?
Yeah, I am. I didn't
Okay.
understand if it was a particular requirement or if it was just additions or exactly what it is.
There is a
that it's
requirement. If we do anything in a particular area, you have to do the full, it's all or nothing. There's
Okay.
no,
Okay.
in some places, there's no option for intermediate.
Yeah, and can be drainage issues and everything where it's like, if you're gonna do, you gotta put a curb in. Well, now you put the curb in, you gotta
Okay.
finish out the
Well,
street. And
That makes
so
more sense.
it kind of snowballs.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the prime examples here that I will say, we also submitted a pre-application for Scatson because we looked at this list to see was Salem Heights. So Salem Heights between Liberty and Commercial, that section between Liberty and Triangle, have you ever have driven on that? It
Yeah.
really does need sidewalks.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it also needs a full, urban street upgrade and so this program isn't really for it, and yet it did score high, and it's,
So it sounds like you have some direction there, some specific direction, and then also some general guidelines on how we think we'd like you to approach this and bring it back.
Okay.
Sounds like-
Could I get one last clarification
Yeah.
though, on the last item, the cost? So I know you had mentioned, well, I guess we know the full streets are out. That's the highest
Yeah.
cost ones.
Yeah,
And so,
I'd rather not put a cap, but nobody else weighed in on it, I don't think.
I was thinking but I thought that that maybe was where Bob was going with his questions, because it doesn't make sense to put a cap if we're talking about spending this money potentially over the next, what do you have, 7 years left or whatever. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to cap or something.
I would agree. What contributes to the cost per linear foot? I mean, it's not just length of how long it
Scope.
is it? I mean, there's a
Terrain.
lot of variation here, and I was just kind of curious.
So the high end, when you had to
Uh-huh.
put sidewalk on both sides and build out the whole street, you just take the length and take the cost and divide the length, and that's what the cost is. So really high, if there's one where maybe there's sidewalk on one side and we just gotta put one on the other side and there's no trees and it's just easy to do, then the cost per foot just goes down. So all we did was look at what's the scope, how much does it cost, and divided by the length. And that's what gave us the cost per foot.
Okay, so on the ones like the requiring full street improvements, it included.
Yeah.
those. Okay,
Did those things.
okay, thank you.
Right, so like if you look at that
I just wanted to
Fairhaven,
make sure I understood
that
it.
Fairhaven project, the one that led into Northgate Park, you know, that was the 6.6 million. So we're already not gonna do that one.
Right.
But you know, it was just a good example of, yes, it needs sidewalks, you know, it's leading to a park, it's leading to transit stops. But it's, like you said, not necessarily really part of this bucket.
Is this Brush College one? Is that right next to the school with the super steep hill?
Mhm.
So then you have like, you have to do a giant retaining wall. That's why this one's expensive. Yes,
That's one reason, yeah.
there's lots of reasons on that one.
And that's another one that ties in with development, you know, I mean, I know I've been saying this for at least 10 years, probably longer. There's development that's in theory on the hook to do that sidewalk. It's just that how long are we gonna wait for it? You know, so.
Yeah, they're looking at the cost of it as well, saying, oh my God.
I know.
Yeah.
And we waited, they're trying to play chicken with the city to see if we'll do it first, and we've got a lot of other projects to focus on. Let's let them do their
So
work.
next slide. So basically just a reminder of, you know, what the next steps are. So we're gonna be working to finalize the cost estimate, sort of suss out some of these, you know, trade-offs, and then come back to the bond committee with a preliminary recommendation, do that public outreach, and get a final recommendation, council approval, and then the scheduling for design and construction. So originally I had said this whole process would take about up to 21 months. We're probably going to be a little bit more than that, really, by the time we get through this. And then the scheduling, that really ties into engineering and their, you know, resources, having resources available to deliver them.
When these projects go out to bid, do you put a, like a target for linear foot? I'm just leaving completely up to.
I mean,
Usually
usually,
unit costs for specific work items, but we don't
Right.
have a total cost.
Yeah.
We break them down into linear feet per square feet.
Anything else, Julie?
Nope.
Thank you. Good discussion, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no new items on the agenda, so now we're on to management update information items, project update. Enterprise resource planning update. Oh, how are you doing here? Let's see.
No, there's a lot of people. Hi, everyone. I am here to give an update on the enterprise resource planning software project. I haven't been here in a while, so there's a lot that's been going on. Just start with the recent events. So in September, the RFP closed and there were 13 responses. The evaluation committee reviewed and invited the top 4 implementation teams back for very long in-person interviews. It was really good. That was in early October. Those 4 implementation teams were representing 2 software systems. So we were only demoing 2 different software systems. After we got through that process and the scoring occurred, we invited the top 2 implementation teams back for more in-person discovery and to ask, it was a little bit less formal. The first was very structured. We had a list of items that we wanted to see, and they just went through the demo scripts as we had presented them. The second round was a lot more informal, where we could just ask questions and interact, and based on what we had seen the first time, you know, follow up on those things. So that happened in early November, and we have since issued a recommendation to award pending successful contract negotiations, and that went to AVAC, who implements Workday. So we're currently working through the contracting process and scheduling initial meetings for functional leads to meet the implementers and start going through some readiness activities and reviewing the scope of work, and then just other contract negotiation items. The tentative project start date is February 1st, but that is really dependent on how long this negotiation process takes. So it could flex out a month or two after that. Just some feedback from the committee about why Workday. Really, it was the user interface. It was far and above better than the other product we were demoing. So we felt like user acceptance and just people being willing to try something new would be better in that system versus the other one we were demoing. It also had a really robust reporting feature, so it was a lot more flexible and able to report more easily across functional areas. So, sorry.
You keep going.
Okay.
I have a question after you're.
Oh,
when you're
perfect.
finished.
Sorry. So another reason was just a really focus on process improvement and efficiencies. Part of the benefit to the city of this project is to be able to rethink those processes that have been in place for the last 25 years and to maybe do some things different, streamline things, be more efficient. So that was something we saw with Workday, and that the product had the focus on innovation and constant enhancement. So those were some of the items that were attractive about moving forward with Workday.
Is this information only for us at this time? You're not asking us anything?
This is information only. Yes.
Thank you. Cool. Pete?
Kelly, I'd just like you to say a little bit more about the committee and who and what the committee was, what their
Yes.
role was.
So we had a cross-functional team. There were several members from finance. There were a few folks from IT, and then someone who was an end user in a department. And GFOA was supporting this effort. So it was in collaboration with GFOA. But it was, we had many very robust discussions because it was a diverse perspective. So it was a really good team.
And could you tell people who don't know what GFOA is?
Yes. So we have contracted with Government Finance Officers Association, and they have been supporting this work in municipalities for over 25 years. And they are not affiliated with any software companies, and they support municipalities through the RFP and contracting process.
Here
And
to help us make the best decision we can.
yes, to
for our
try to
city.
make the best decision we can. Yeah. Their work is almost concluded. I will say that my work as project lead for this section of the project is almost over. So after we sign, yes, I know. After we sign a contract, that focus project management will transition to IT.
Nice.
So they're in recruitment now for that.
Good work.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think anybody who's in Salem who's connected with anybody who works for the state hears that word and like their insides crumble. Yes. So what kind of reassurances have you gotten from them that the rollout will be much, much better? And I am seeking perfection, but I know that's not available to us.
So we did have a number of conversations about this. We asked them directly at least 3 or 4 times. We had different conversations about, we saw this in the news, we're seeing, issues, what's going on. They did reassure us. I mean, the state implementation was much, much, much larger than ours. They have, 33 collective bargaining agreements. We have 5. They have 40,000 employees. We have less than 2,000. So I think the scope and scale, all those rules have to be built for each of those different contracts. And then not only do they have to be built, but they also have to be tested and validated and verified. So I think just the scope and scale for the city is a lot smaller than the state project. We also got an idea of how many employees at the state were actually impacted by these errors. And they, don't quote me, this is from memory, but I believe it was under 500 is what they said. Don't quote me. I can go back. I can get confirmation. But compared to the overall population of people who were getting paid, whether it was 500 or more, it was a very, very small percentage of folks who were receiving incorrect.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important with any kind of transition like this to know that there will be hiccups and struggles, especially in the beginning. My disappointment with this group at the state level is that they haven't fixed it for so long, like the problems are continuing, and I don't know how many years it's been, at least 2. Yeah.
But this is a
So we-
different implementation team than the state
Yes,
used,
different.
right?
Yeah,
It's the
it's a-
same product, but different team
Yeah.
installing.
Which
and
is great.
implementing.
And
I like different.
And the
teams.
implementer really makes a huge difference on projects of these, in just technology projects. You know, whether staff is collaborating well, whether they're not, whether there's good communication, whether there's not. So, yeah, that's
Whether-
really important.
Whether they're all trained or
Right,
not,
yes,
it's huge.
yeah. Bless you.
Thank you. I needed a Julie Hansen sneeze for my last meeting. Thank you.
Good luck on this project. I think it's fantastic and really exciting, and I hope it really goes well.
Anything else? Thank you. Good job.
You had some question.
No,
Oh, wait, I had a couple of questions. No, I just wanted to ask, I wanted to mention the document accessibility. There's certain things with it that are really, really nice. Who is going to be creating the training modules for employees to use it? Have they talked about that at all?
So we're still in the very beginning phases, but when you say training, I'm assuming someone on the HR side of the house would be developing in tandem with our implementation team. So they have some training support in developing training materials on the implementer side, but then the city staff will also be responsible for developing some training materials and rolling out the training to staff.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, it'd be nice if you could borrow stuff from the state. They've developed a lot through the years. Let's say user interface, customizability. Is that going to be a problem if you have specific things? And is it going to be applicable to all divisions, everybody, all city employees? I mean, like fire or everything? Or is everyone going to be using Workday?
For certain processes, yeah.
Okay, for payroll time.
Yes.
That's where she's
Okay.
going, you know.
Okay, because, and is everybody on bi-weekly pay right now?
Yes.
Okay, so that's easier because state hasn't been, okay. Yeah, I know.
They're going to be.
I know, feedback from union, I mean, we can talk about it once it gets into that, just some things to kind of be aware of, having worked really close with it and also being, chief steward of the union, working with the grievances, et cetera, with a lot of state employees. Just, there's some things that might be good to discuss.
Yeah, for sure. And the goal is not to have those, right? Of course.
Yeah, oh, of course,
The
of
goal is
course.
to work through all the kinks, learn the lessons from others and not repeat those things. So definitely.
No, I
That's the
appreciate it.
goal.
Well, I just wanted to say it's, yes, it's complicated and there's a lot of pushback at the beginning, but once you learn some of the little tricks and ways to save time, it does help. It depends on how many cost codes and how many of the other, there are a whole bunch of things that can make it pretty complicated, but you may not need all those.
I don't want to cut this short, but we have 11 minutes left for 2
Oh,
more items.
I'm sorry. Okay,
It's okay.
all right.
Aaron Kinsey, Civic Center retrofit Peace Plaza.
Everybody, so I have an update, but also something that we need direction on, and it's good, hopefully this meeting, so we can keep our project team moving forward on design. So as you may recall, we had quite a few conversations about the Civic Center project and the budget, what we could do and not do, and sort of came up with some prioritizations. And one of those priorities was to upgrade the the fountain at Peace Plaza. And we had kind of decided on $100,000, so we're gonna allocate for an allowance to Peace Plaza. And so that's what this slide represents. Essentially, we're gonna flatten the surface so that we don't have any pooling around the fountain. So they require chlorinated water. So that requires a new pump and some chemical equipment and some new underground lines. So since that time, we've gotten a lot smarter about what kind of long-term effects we might have with implementing this fountain or reinstating the fountain back at Peace Plaza. So go to the next slide. What we heard is that actually adding chlorine to the water, which is a requirement of having the fountain be reinstated, is going to cause damage to the existing sculpture over time. And so that's a concern that we have.
And it's not optional.
It's not optional.
And the sculpture are those wing?
Not the
thing?
concrete.
Okay.
Yeah, the concrete spires, for lack of a better word.
Triangle.
Triangles,
pieces of
there's all
whatever.
adjectives for them. Those are original to the Peace Plaza back in '72, and they the art that was installed later. I don't even know the date. 87. So in the old days. Oh, perfect. So the spires kind of influenced the art. But they would have, the concrete wouldn't have an impact. It would be the metal.
But the chlorine's gonna impact the metal.
Okay. So that's one concern. Another concern is whether we call it a splash pad or not, it's going to essentially operate as a splash pad. You introduce water to the public like that, it's going to be an attractive, I don't want to say nuisance.
My kids will get it.
But people will want to get into it. So which is part of the reason why it needs to be chlorinated. And we heard from Parks, we had a conversation with Park staff, and one of their concerns was we don't really need a splash pad in this part of town right now. We have one at River Park. I'm looking at Rob, next to where the other ones are, but this is not a
What's that?
Okay, West Bennett. Yeah, if we're gonna add a splash pad, we're gonna add a splash pad to the city's list of splash pads. This would be the highest priority spot for it. I wanted to include that by introducing this fountain, we would be having an average cost to operate fountains is about $28,000 per year.
What's that? What's that paying for?
So you got your chemicals, the maintenance on the pumps, probably some for cleaning, water,
Checking
for
for chlorine.
Repairing things that break, that's a big one.
and then
Getting it ready for season, getting it.
yeah, you gotta winterize it and then bring it back up. It would be only operational for like maybe 4 months, because that's what our normal, 4 months that we use for other fountains, splash pads.
When school's out.
It's not a splash pad, it's a fountain.
Not a
We're
splash
calling it a
pad.
splash pad.
When school is out, is generally
Yeah.
what we use.
What about for fountains though? Not splash, we're not talking about a splash pad here.
The other concern is safety and risk. And so the art is metal, sharp edges. It's not designed to be a space for folks to be playing in the water and it's slippery.
It was made for Gen Xers. We get it.
Right.
We get it.
So so I wanted to bring these items, these issues to this group because I think we had decided that fountain was kind of a priority for us. But I wanted to also show you, from a bigger picture, we have our design team looking at Peace Plaza alternates. So what I'm going to show you here are things that we can't afford.
Oh, God.
But
You're killing us.
But I hope that it gives you a good vision for what the Peace Plaza could become. And we are essentially saying that we could, through potentially savings for the project, or if we are able to procure or identify some other some grant funding perhaps, or because it is a park, there's potentially some revenue, or not revenue, but applications that we could apply for potentially. There was a legislative ask that we will probably go back for again. So there are potentially some opportunities where we can really switch funding. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a rendering of what the previous slide showed. And so the landscape architect is creating some softer feels with the landscape surrounding, the sculpture, some benches, some places for folks to sit. This is one perspective, so this is looking back at City Hall. And then go to the next slide.
What's that stair area or ramp area or amphitheater kind of area in the back? Is that what that is?
Let's go up.
Those
to
are
the
the
stairs.
existing.
Those are
stairs.
existing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
go up,
okay.
yeah. This is a view from the commercial
It was turned
pull through. This is another vantage point, potentially, having this pathway that goes into that area. I think we have one more slide. So there's a couple different perspectives. I mean, honestly, when I look at this, I feel like that this design does a really good job of like centralizing the art and making it like more of a focal point. Not sure if, yeah.
And you said we can't afford it. What's the cost?
I don't know if we have a cost for this yet. We will have it in January. We're working on scope. We have 50% design development submittal from the designer. And Howard is right. Contractors pricing all of those options in 50% design development. And so I think really what I would like to get from you guys today is whether do we want to proceed with funding and design to bring the fountain back up from the grave, or do we want to say let's not prioritize the fountain at this point, and wait and see on what other funding we might be able to come up with over the life of this project.
Well, it sounds like the fountain's not an option. I mean, if we develop a fountain, we're going to destroy the art.
I agree. I just wanted you guys to know the information.
How do we know that?
The vendor for who does like specializes in fountain stuff, he immediately saw the art. He said, "Oh, that metal is gonna corrode."
And is that using just chlorine or is it using bromide or
It's the
any
chlorine.
other, are there other options?
I don't think so. I didn't have that question.
Yeah, because there are other options for treating water.
Yeah. I don't think we've asked that question specifically.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm assuming it's some sort of state code that's requiring that.
Yes. Part of the reason why
That's why
it
it
was
was
shut
shut
down
down.
previously. Yes, same code.
Because people keep wanting to call it a splash pad. When it's a fountain. Well, my goal is to maintain it in its original purpose, which is a fountain, but if it's not an option, then we need, this is beautiful design, I mean, a beautiful concept, which is great, it's a good alternative, but my first preference is making it back to its original intent. But if that's not viable, then go to plan B. It's my thought.
So is the priority then to recreate or to modify the landscape and use that as priority one, and then priority two would be reestablishing the fountain if that were feasible?
For me, it's a binary choice. Yes, we can do the fountain, no, we can't. If we can, go with the fountain. If we can't, then you go on to the other options. That's just my approach to it.
Right.
But I'm only one person.
I think that there's also consideration, not only is there other chemicals that would work and not harm the art, but I think you brought up another point about how the community is going to use the space, and does it need to be modified so that it isn't used in that way, or does that, am I making sense?
Yeah, well, I mean,
And then what kind of added cost is that? And
the fence around it, or
right, we go down a rabbit hole. I really do like the greenery, adding more greenery out
I do
there.
too.
You bake out there, and I was actually out walking there the other night, and it was pouring down rain, and the pavement out there is crap. Like, can I say that in a public meeting?
You just did.
Okay. I happen to be in heels, and it was not a super great situation. And so I think when you can take up some of that with greenery and add more paths that can be easily maintained. I mean, again, I'm thinking about the long-term maintenance of these things, not having $28,000 a year to maintain a fountain. That's also something that needs to be considered.
Aaron, you might explain too that it would be leveled
Discussion about that one.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So currently, when you go out there, you can see those are pretty severe slope, and that was so that water could drain. And actually, so the plan would be to level it out. We would still have some slope on that grade because it does basically acts as a giant catch basin for all the storm water that left East Plaza. So we would still maintain, portion, slight slope, but it would not be as steep.
So we need to move the
ADA.
conversation along, so we need the others to weigh in, please.
Do you have any idea what the cost of maintaining landscaping is? I know you don't have a cost on the
Yeah.
implementation of the building of the project, but.
I don't. I don't park, or do you have any kind of?
There's a
estimate?
park maintenance operator assigned to the Civic Center and some other park units nearby, and it would just be added to their duties.
So, minimal.
Other duties is this time. I mean, I like the idea of the fountain, but I also understand the problems. There's still water plumbed to the area though, right? I'm just wondering if in design, I know this might kind of silly, but those smaller fountains, like people put in other places like little bubbler fountains or something. I mean, something around the structure where we could just for the ambiance and the sound, maybe.
Like it's not bad.
I think
No. Water, if
Yeah,
there's
you know,
something we
totally
could
would.
put in, just, I mean, because those are kind of calming and nice, but I like the,
the problem is kids are gonna get in it.
not if it's just a little bunch of rocks that
Oh,
come down.
Like, that's a
right?
totally different fountain.
Totally different fountain.
Gotcha.
No. I'm just thinking of the sound, water.
But we're never gonna get rid of that sculpture.
No,
No.
I'm not saying to get rid of it. I'm just saying to make it as simple as whatever. Yeah, anyway, that's just a thought.
To ensure that water is still a part of the experience in
Yes.
East Plaza is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I
Nine
like a
months out of
fish
the year,
pond,
it
but
is.
that's.
It
not
is.
gonna happen. That's Jordan. We're not putting a fish
What
pond
is
around it.
Yeah.
No, I like the greenery. I agree with you. I'd like to see more shaded areas, cooler areas. It
For
looks like
sure.
a lot of concrete.
For sure.
We still have a lot of meetings to have with the interested parties as far as this plaza goes. We had an open house, and unfortunately, we only had 2 people show up. So that was a bust. But we're gonna have individual meetings with different groups, friends of Peace Plaza, and then SPRAB, SPAC, because of the art, the library, foundation. So this is just kind of what we have so far. It could change over time as we get more input from those groups.
Do you feel like you got any direction from us?
I think what I heard is we're not gonna move forward with design on the fountain at this time. I'll look into other chemicals to see if that's an option, but I think it's important to note that even if we don't damage the art, we still have the cost of it and the safety and risk concerns.
Yeah.
So
Yes, I'd like.
Come here in January or whenever the next meeting is, we will bring back some more information about cost of this concept and what we could achieve with the 100,000.
yeah, we can do that.
Great,
That sounds good.
thank you. All right, speaking of Alan Dannon, PE, city engineer, we are on to Silverton Road improvements and 17th Street pedestrian crossing.
Thank you for allowing me to take my favorite slot where I take the meeting over time.
Yes, yes, you are welcome.
I'm just gonna quickly give you all an update on the Silverton Road project, and we can dive into the map if we need to, but start at a high level and go from there. And I want to kind of give you
Oops, we just lost it.
I think you want me to start.
update on where the project's at, and then make you aware of one item that would be coming to council. So the project, as you all may remember, is a lot of different elements. We start with rehabbing the deteriorated large sewer trunk main that runs under a portion of the project. And I just approved the plans to go out to bid on that segment of the work. Yes. So that work will get going later in the summer, and then we have a follow-on separate contract because of the special nature of the waste project. That does all the other improvements. So as a reminder, that includes the intersection improvements at 17th and Silverton, the pavement rehab work east of there, all the way almost to Lansing, the reconfiguration of the street. So we're going from 4 lanes to 3 and adding bike lanes, And then we did allocate some missing sidewalk money to this project to create a single corridor on one side of Silverton. For pretty much the entire way where we're missing, where we have those gaps. So that will be a follow-on contract that probably bids later this summer and begin fall. One item that we've been working on that we need for both of those projects is wiring right of way and easements. And one of the entities we've been working with is the state because of the fairground. And it's especially important for the sewer piece of the work because we need places to put the bypass piping while we line the existing sewer. And I think we talked about it here before, is one of the things that Fairgrounds asked us is, could there be a pedestrian crossing on 17th Street near the Jackson Law building as part of this project? And since we had a significant acquisition need from them, could we, instead of paying them for that, those easements and right away, put that towards this pedestrian crossing? So we've been working on that with them. We thought we had hit a snag where we said, well, the total cost of the crossing that we worked with them to kind of come up with the concept for is $375,000 approximately. And the total value of the easements and right of way is only about $275,000. After some discussion, the Fairgrounds has come forward and said they would be willing to contribute the additional $100,000 to make it happen. So this is a win-win, I think, where we can, instead of paying them for easements and right of way, we can do something that will be out there for after the project's over, and a big benefit for the fair and other events.
Certainly needed.
Yeah. So, so that's great news. We're moving forward with an agreement with them that should come to council. I think we're targeting in January if we get everything drafted. So I wanted to let you all know that the improvement itself is a median island and then with flashing beacons, not the typical RFPs. We actually are going to use edge lit signs in this location. That's part of our discussion with the fair folks and the property.
Plus they're a lot cheaper, right?
They're cheaper and I think a little cheaper than. But anyway, I just want to give you all that update, make sure everybody was good with that.
Cool. Any questions or comments? Concerns?
Sorry, I made it late.
That's okay. It's a fitting way to end. I just wanted to take a moment as we're wrapping up and just say thank you to all members of the committee and certainly all the staff. I think this has been one of the best committees to be involved with over the years. There are some that are more gratifying than others. And this one, I feel like it's, we have fun, but yet it's really no nonsense and we get a lot of really good stuff done. And I think we've implemented some great policy that is going to have a lasting impact, especially with the equity scoring and the consideration on how we look at projects. And so thank you all for helping to make that happen. I really appreciated the time with you all, and I hope you have all the success going forward.
Ditto.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. We're adjourned.